Imagine this. You're a detective, and the same DNA signature keeps appearing at crime scenes across 3 countries. Murder scenes, robbery scenes. The DNA belongs to a woman, someone who seems to move like a ghost through Europe, leaving death and chaos in her wake. For 15 years, this phantom terrorized communities from Germany to Austria to France. Police issued international manhunts. They offered rewards. They followed thousands of leads. The media dubbed her the woman without a face and the Phantom of Heilbronn. But here's the thing. She never existed. Today, we're diving into one of the most embarrassing and eye-opening cases in modern forensic history. A case that shook the foundations of DNA evidence and forced police forces across Europe to question everything they thought they knew about scientific investigation. This is the story of how a simple cotton swab fooled some of the world's most advanced police departments for over a decade, and how the truth, when it finally came out, was stranger than anyone could have imagined. Background. To understand how this incredible mix-up happened, we need to go back to the beginning, to a cold March day in 2007 in Heilbronn, Germany. Heilbronn is a quiet city in southwestern Germany, known more for its vineyards and medieval architecture than violent crime. It's the kind of place where people leave their doors unlocked and children walk to school alone. So when 22-year-old police officer Michelle Kiesewetter was found shot dead in her patrol car, the entire community was shaken to its core. Michelle was a dedicated officer, just 2 years into her career. On March 25th, she and her partner Martin Arnold were conducting a routine patrol in the Theresienwiese Park area during the city's Spring Festival. It should have been a normal shift, checking on festival preparations, maybe dealing with a few minor disturbances. Instead, it became a crime scene that would baffle investigators for years. The shooting happened in broad daylight. Someone approached their patrol car and opened fire without warning. Martin Arnold was severely wounded but survived. Michelle wasn't so lucky. She died at the scene, becoming the first female police officer killed in the line of duty in Baden-Württemberg state history. The brutality was shocking, but what happened next in the investigation would prove even more extraordinary. When forensic teams processed the crime scene, they collected every piece of potential evidence: bullet casings, fingerprints, and most importantly, DNA samples from various surfaces in and around the patrol car. The DNA extraction and analysis followed standard procedures that had been used successfully in thousands of cases before. When the results came back, investigators found DNA from an unknown female at the scene. This wasn't unusual. Witnesses, first responders, and even random passers-by could leave traces. But this particular DNA profile would soon become the most sought-after genetic signature in European law enforcement. What investigators didn't know was that they had just encountered evidence of a criminal who would lead them on one of the longest and most fruitless manhunts in modern history. Timeline of events. The story of the Phantom begins long before Michelle Kiesewetter's murder. In fact, by 2007, this mysterious woman's DNA had already been turning up at crime scenes for several years. 1993. The first appearance. The earliest recorded appearance of our Phantom's DNA was in 1993, at the scene of a burglary in the German town of Idar-Oberstein. A woman's house had been broken into, and when police processed the scene, they found the now familiar genetic signature. At the time, it was just another unsolved case, hardly unusual in property crime investigations. 1993-2001, scattered appearances. Over the next 8 years, the same DNA profile appeared sporadically at various crime scenes across Germany, sometimes at burglaries, sometimes at car thefts. The crimes seemed random, unconnected except for this single genetic thread. Police databases began flagging the matches, but without additional evidence, there was little investigators could do. 2001, a disturbing escalation. The Phantom's crimes appeared to escalate in 2001 when her DNA was found at the scene of a murder in Freiburg. A 62-year-old woman named Lieselotte Schlenger had been killed in her home. The case was particularly disturbing because of its brutality, and the presence of the Phantom's DNA suggested she had graduated from property crime to murder. This pattern, the escalation from petty crime to violence, fit perfectly with criminal profiling models. Investigators began to take the Phantom much more seriously. 2002-2006, international scope. The Phantom's reach seemed to extend beyond Germany's borders. Her DNA began appearing at crime scenes in Austria and France as well. Each appearance was carefully logged and cross-referenced. The pattern suggested someone highly mobile, possibly involved in organized crime, moving freely across European borders. In Austria, her DNA was found at multiple burglary scenes in Vienna and Salzburg. In France, she was linked to several property crimes in the Alsace region, near the German border. The geographic spread was impressive and suggested either a criminal network or an exceptionally active individual. 2007, the Heilbronn murder. When Michelle Kiesewetter was murdered and the Phantom's DNA was found at the scene, everything changed. This wasn't just another burglary or property crime. This was the cold-blooded murder of a police officer committed in broad daylight in a public place. The Phantom had seemingly declared war on law enforcement itself. The German police response was massive. The investigation, codenamed Operation Parkplatz, Operation Parking Lot, became one of the largest in German history. Hundreds of officers were assigned to the case. The reward for information grew to $300,000, an enormous sum by German standards. 2008-2009. The hunt intensifies. As the investigation continued, the Phantom's DNA kept appearing. New crime scenes in Germany, Austria, and France all bore her genetic signature. Each new appearance was analyzed, mapped, and added to an increasingly complex profile. Criminal profilers worked overtime trying to understand this woman. They theorized she might be a drug addict, given the seemingly random nature of many crimes. Others suggested she could be involved in human trafficking or other organized criminal activities. Some even wondered if she might be a rogue police officer or someone with law enforcement connections, given her ability to evade capture. The media coverage was intense. Newspapers across Europe ran stories about the mysterious woman without a face. Television programs featured reconstructions and appeals for information. The Phantom had become a household name, even though no one knew what she looked like. 2009. Technological dead ends. By 2009, investigators had employed every technological tool at their disposal. DNA analysis had been repeated multiple times. Geographic profiling had mapped every known crime scene. Behavioral analysts had created detailed psychological profiles. Yet the Phantom remained as elusive as ever. No fingerprints, no witness descriptions, no surveillance footage, just that persistent DNA signature appearing again and again like a ghostly calling card. The investigation had reached a crucial juncture. With traditional methods exhausted, investigators needed to think outside the box. Little did they know that the solution would come from an entirely unexpected direction and would reveal a truth that would embarrass police forces across 3 countries. Investigation details. The investigation into the Phantom of Heilbronn was a masterclass in modern police work, extensive, methodical, and technologically sophisticated. It was also, as it turned out, completely misdirected. The task force German authorities assembled what they called Soko Parkplatz, Special Commission Parking Lot, a joint task force involving federal police, state investigators, and Interpol. The team included some of Germany's most experienced detectives, forensic specialists, and criminal profilers. They had access to cutting-edge technology and virtually unlimited resources. The task force operated out of a dedicated facility in Stuttgart, with officers working around the clock analyzing evidence, following leads, and coordinating with international partners. Wall-sized maps tracked every known appearance of the Phantom's DNA. Computer databases cross-referenced thousands of potential suspects. DNA analysis and reanalysis. The Phantom's DNA profile was remarkably complete. Investigators had a full genetic fingerprint that should have made identification straightforward once a suspect was found. The profile indicated European ancestry, which matched the geographic pattern of the crimes. What puzzled investigators was the consistency of the DNA evidence. In most cases involving a prolific criminal, DNA quality varies from scene to scene. Some samples are degraded, others are mixed with additional genetic material. But the Phantom's DNA was remarkably pure and consistent across all crime scenes. This consistency actually worked against the investigation in an unexpected way. It was so perfect, so clean, that it reinforced investigators' confidence in their approach. They never questioned the DNA evidence itself, only their ability to find the person it represented. Profiling, the phantom criminal profilers developed an extensive psychological portrait of their unknown subject. Based on the crime patterns, they theorized she was likely between 25 and 45 years old, possibly struggling with drug addiction to explain the property crimes, highly mobile, with access to transportation across borders, potentially connected to organized crime networks escalating in violence over time. The profile seemed logical and was consistent with known criminal behavior patterns. It gave investigators a framework for understanding their suspect and guided their search strategies. International cooperation. The Phantom case became a model of international police cooperation. German investigators worked closely with their counterparts in Austria and France, sharing information in real time and coordinating search efforts. Interpol issued international alerts. Border security was enhanced. Database searches expanded across multiple countries. For the first time, European police forces were truly working as a unified entity against a single criminal. Media strategy and public appeals. Recognizing that traditional investigative methods weren't yielding results, authorities launched an unprecedented media campaign. They released detailed information about the Phantom's crime patterns, hoping to generate public leads. Television programs featured reconstructions of various crime scenes. Newspapers published maps showing the Phantom's movements across Europe. The case became a media sensation, with public fascination focused on this mysterious woman who seemed to move like a ghost through some of Europe's most secure countries. The breakthrough. That wasn't. Several times during the investigation, authorities thought they had found their Phantom. In 2008, a woman was arrested in France whose appearance and criminal history seemed to match the profile. Her DNA was tested immediately. It wasn't a match. In 2009, German police arrested a woman found at the scene of a burglary in Munich. Again, hopes were high, and again, DNA testing ruled out the connection. Each false lead was devastating for the investigation team. They were following solid police work, using proven investigative techniques, yet somehow their Phantom remained elusive. The growing doubt. By late 2008, some investigators were beginning to question their fundamental assumptions. The Phantom's ability to evade detection was extraordinary. Despite leaving DNA evidence at dozens of crime scenes, she had never left fingerprints, never been captured on surveillance cameras, never been witnessed by victims or bystanders. One detective later described the growing unease. It was like chasing a ghost. We had proof she existed, her DNA, but everything else about her was invisible. This doubt would prove to be the key that eventually unlocked the truth. But first, investigators had to overcome their own confidence in the infallibility of DNA evidence. Resolution and current status. The truth about the Phantom of Heilbronn came to light in March 2009, almost exactly 2 years after Michael Kiesewetter murder. The revelation was so unexpected, so embarrassing, that it sent shockwaves through law enforcement agencies across Europe. The asylum seeker's fingerprints. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. French police had arrested 2 asylum seekers for a minor crime and, following standard procedure, took their fingerprints. When they tried to run the fingerprints through their database, they made a disturbing discovery. The fingerprints came back with a DNA match to the Phantom of Heilbronn. This should have been impossible. These were 2 men, not the female serial killer everyone was seeking. More puzzling still, their fingerprints were taken on equipment that had never been used to process DNA samples. The cotton swab connection. Confused French investigators began tracing the chain of evidence. They discovered that the fingerprinting equipment had been cleaned with cotton swabs, the same type of cotton swabs used to collect DNA evidence at crime scenes. This led to a startling realization. What if the Phantom's DNA wasn't coming from crime scenes at all? What if it was coming from the cotton swabs themselves? The factory worker. The investigation quickly traced the cotton swabs to their manufacturer, a medical supply company in Austria. The company produced cotton swabs that were supposed to be sterile and DNA-free, suitable for forensic use. But when investigators tested samples from the factory, they found the Phantom's DNA on unused swabs, still in their packaging. The DNA belonged to a woman who worked at the factory, a 40-year-old employee who had been unknowingly contaminating forensic evidence for over 15 years. The woman was not a criminal at all. She was a law-abiding citizen who had never committed a crime in her life. Her DNA had been transferred to the cotton swabs during the manufacturing process, despite procedures that were supposed to prevent contamination. The scope of the error. The revelation was devastating. Not only had there never been a phantom of Heilbronn, but potentially thousands of cases across Europe had been compromised by contaminated evidence. Police forces had to review every case where these cotton swabs had been used. The financial cost ran into millions of euros. The investigative hours were incalculable. Most painfully, real criminals had remained free while police chased a phantom created by contaminated evidence. Current status: Michel Kiesewetter murder remains unsolved to this day. Without the phantom's DNA as a lead, investigators have had to start from scratch, using traditional detective work and other forensic evidence. The case led to major reforms in forensic procedures across Europe. Manufacturing standards for forensic supplies were completely overhauled. Chain of custody procedures were strengthened. Most importantly, the infallibility of DNA evidence was finally questioned. Reflection and impact. The Phantom of Heilbronn case stands as one of the most important cautionary tales in modern forensic science. It demonstrated that even our most trusted scientific evidence can lead us astray if proper controls aren't in place. The case changed how police approach DNA evidence. No longer is genetic evidence considered infallible. Investigators now routinely test control samples and question contamination possibilities. The phrase, "trust but verify," has become central to forensic analysis. For the family of Michel Kiesewetter, the phantom revelation was both devastating and hopeful. Devastating because it meant years of investigation had been wasted, but hopeful because it meant her real killer might still be found. The case also highlighted the dangers of over-reliance on technology in criminal investigations. Traditional detective work, interviewing witnesses, following paper trails, understanding human behavior, remains as important as ever, even in our digital age. Perhaps most importantly, the Phantom of Heilbronn taught us that, in the pursuit of justice, healthy skepticism isn't cynicism. It's necessary. Even when the evidence seems overwhelming, even when technology provides clear answers, we must always be willing to question our assumptions. Because sometimes, the most obvious explanation isn't the right one. Sometimes, the phantom we're chasing exists only in our minds, created by our faith in infallible science and our desire to find patterns where none exist. The woman without a face taught us that the most dangerous criminals aren't always the ones leaving DNA at crime scenes. Sometimes, they're the assumptions we carry with us every day.